Coming up on Tech News Today, Google beating Apple in Japan. Also, cable ISPs admit the bandwidth caps are not about congestion. And is Glee ripping off Jonathan Colton, ripping off Sir Mix-a-Lot? We'll explain next.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Friday, January 18th, 2013. Tech News Today is brought to you by Gazelle, the fast and simple way to sell last year's gadgets. Find out what your used iPad, MacBook, iPhone, Galaxy S, and other smartphones are worth at Gazelle.com. Welcome to Tech News Today. I'm Tom Merritt.
I'm Isaac Tar.
And I'm Jason Howell. Why did I not hear Sarah Lane? There we go. Sorry about that, Sarah.
It's okay.
There we go.
Okay.
Sorry.
This is the show where we keep you up to date on the most important stories in the tech world, put them in context for you, starting with the top 10 stories of the day in the news fuse. Remember those changeable faceplates on the old Nokias like the 3310? Well, Nokia has not abandoned its customizable case heritage. As a part of the 3D printing development kit, Nokia has published files that let customers design and print their own cases for the Nokia Lumia 820. The company even provides guidance on what materials may work best.
Sources tell Reuters that Sharp's iPad screen production line at its Kameyama plant in Japan has been cut to minimum after a gradual slowdown began at the end of 2012. So, how much of the slowdown is due to seasonal changes in demand or consumers opting for the smaller iPad mini over the Retina model? Not entirely clear, and not surprisingly, spokespeople for both Apple and Sharp aren't commenting.
According to Bloomberg, there's trouble in Sprint's acquisition of Clearwire. Clearwire shareholders want Sprint to raise its bid after Dish made its own offer. Sprint already owns over 50% of Clearwire and offered $2.97 per share for that remainder. Dish offered $3.30 per share. Sources say that Clearwire investor Terran Asset Management will file a complaint with the FCC saying Clearwire is worth more than Sprint's current bid.
Have users fled Instagram after the controversy over the new terms of service? Well, Instagram says no. The company reports that 90 million people use Instagram on a monthly basis, and that number is up 10% since December. A third-party company called AppData has reported declines in active daily usage, though that number is more likely to fluctuate than the monthly numbers Instagram is using.
Publisher Hearst will now make the entire catalog of their magazines on iOS available to subscribers before the magazines come out in print. How many days in advance will vary by title, but both existing subscribers and new subscribers will benefit from the new feature, which is so far exclusive to iOS's newsstand.
Intel began production of its future-gen codenamed Haswell microprocessors in Q4 of 2012. The new chips, made using 22-nanometer process tech, promise to revolutionize notebooks and ultrabooks with better performance, things like voice recognition, gestures, touch screens, and lower power consumption, including something called all-day battery life, which actually translates to about 9 hours.
Yeah, all day, 9 hours. Okay, sure. Judge Lucy Coe issued an order for Tim Cook to give a deposition in an antitrust case. For those of you whose heads are spinning with litigation, this is the case that involves Apple, Google, Intel, Pixar, Adobe, and Lucasfilm as defendants, and says that these companies agreed to not poach workers from each other. Intel CEO Paul Otellini and Google chairman Eric Schmidt will also be deposed.
Google just bought 2.4 acres in London's King's Cross area for the sum of £1 billion. Google will build a 7- and 11-story complex on the land, and the project is expected to be completed in 2016. The company already has 2 offices in London.
Sony, on the other hand, has agreed to sell its headquarters in New York to a consortium led by the Chetrit Group for $1.1 billion, potentially avoiding negative Q3 revenue consequences. According to Reuters, Sony may make a similar move in Tokyo, which could get the company another $1.14 billion to balance its budget.
Did you know that Facebook stores all of your photos on traditional hard disks? Well, now that the company is hosting billions of those photos hard drives make less and less sense. Those older photos aren't accessed that often. If they remain on hard drives, there's a large amount of power being consumed for pretty much no reason. So what do? Move to flash memory? Facebook's VP of Infrastructure Engineering, Jay Parikh, says he wants a new version that's specifically designed for data that's accessed only occasionally. He tells Wired, we want something with a low write endurance. We want to get something with a much, much lower unit cost per gigabyte.
This episode of Tech News Today brought to you by Gazelle.com. I just moved. I got a bunch of stuff that I'm unpacking, and I'm like, I don't need this anymore. A lot of it's old gadgets. Maybe you got new gadgets for the holidays. Maybe you got yourself a new iPhone, one of those Samsung Galaxy S3s. Or maybe you got an iPad or a MacBook Pro. Get those old gadgets out of your house. Don't be like me and have to move them later. Get some money for them. Gazelle makes selling last year's gadgets fast and simple. Here's how you do it. Go to Gazelle.com. That's Gazelle.com. Tell Gazelle the condition. They'll even buy broken iPhones and iPads. Get a risk-free offer for your gadgets. Lock in that quote for 30 days. And then you'll get paid fast by check or PayPal once they get the device. You can get an offer for your iPhone, your Android, your BlackBerry phone, your iPad, other Apple products. But do it today because gadgets lose value over time. They don't appreciate until they're extraordinarily old, like, from the 60s and stuff. You don't want to wait that long. Get paid in cash. Payment is fast within a few days of the items being received. The lock-in of 30 days gives you a chance to get the data off there, make sure it's secure. Gazelle will actually wipe your data for free, too. Gazelle has paid $50 million to over 500,000 customers. It's easy. Sell your last year's gadgets today at Gazelle.com. And we thank them for their support of Tech News Today. Darren Kitchen, good to have you back on a Friday, man. How are things going?
Hello, hello. Things are going great. Happy to be here.
Of course, you can always get Darren at hack5.org, HAK5.org. Let's start off talking about the Google Nexus 7 rocketing to the top of the charts in Japan, Sarah.
Yeah, based on a survey, this was conducted by BCN market research firm back in December. Surveyed 2,400 consumer electronics stores in Japan. The Google Nexus 7 had 44.4% of the market versus the iPad, which was at 40.1%. All right, so there are a lot of variables here. As I mentioned in the news fuse, there are reports of Sharp reportedly cutting orders for at least the full-size iPad, possibly to make way for increased mini demand. There is also the same survey that I mentioned noted that the iPad mini had been in shortages all over Japan at stores. So perhaps that has something to do with the fact that the Nexus 7 is selling so well. But then again, the Nexus 7 is about $100 less than the iPad mini in Japan. And clearly, the price has something to do with it, but it's obviously a tablet that folks like over there. So I'm wondering what you guys make of this. I know that it would be crazy for production lines not to slow down after a huge holiday season for Apple. But does it seem like it makes sense that the full-size iPad rather, would be slowed down to a minimum at a production plant, ramped all the way down from all systems go, just because the mini is in such high demand and Japanese consumers want that and can't get it?
I could see that happening with the iPad, the larger one, because when Apple refreshed to this 4th generation version, they didn't really change the cosmetics, and I don't think they've done a big advertising push the same way they've done with the iPad mini. That's cannibalizing sales of the iPad in general, but this newest version of the iPad, to a lot of people, just appears to be the same old one with some slight modifications inside. So I don't think that's so crazy that's what's happening right now at Sharp. As for the Nexus 7, I mean, it's a low-cost device. It's very powerful. And it's not so crazy for Apple to be losing market share. I mean, you can't be on top forever. And Google's got a really good low-cost product.
Well, and it sounds like in Japan, tablet sales, they're on the rise. According to figures from IDC Japan, tablet sales in Japan were 3.6 million units in 2012, expected to climb to almost 5 million, 4.9 million through 2013. So, yeah, I mean, they're not all going to be iPads, whether it's regular iPad or iPad mini. The Nexus 7 is just, it's a great tablet. A lot of people like it. Tom, does this look bad for Apple, or is this just kind of they're figuring out how to balance the scales again? Maybe fewer Retina iPads and maybe more minis.
Yeah, I think it's weird that everyone just is so quick to jump on the death of Apple. I guess because it's been riding high for so long, people don't believe it can keep it up, and so any little shred of evidence becomes fodder for people to declare the decline. If anything, you could stretch this into saying it's bad supply chain management, right? Like, well, if the iPad mini was going to cannibalize the iPad sales that much, they should have known that in advance and shouldn't be cutting orders. But at the same time, this is how you manage things. I'm not a supply chain manager, but it makes sense to say, oh, we're going to adapt as sales come along. And we knew that the displays that Sharp are making can be used for both the mini and the iPad. So, if we just kind of reduce the amount because the minis are selling well, it's not a big hit. It's not a big problem. I think overall, the fact of the matter is Apple doesn't care if it cannibalizes iPad sales with iPad minis. Apple's never cared about cannibalizing its own sales. It just wants to sell you as many of its own products as it can. So overall, this is probably good news for Apple. The fact that the Nexus 7 is topping the iPad in Japan is a little bit surprising to me, but it also means that the Nexus 7 is a great tablet, and it is a great tablet. So we've got competition in the tablet market, and I think that's good for consumers.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Darren, any thoughts on the tablet wars?
No, I mean, I about to say you just summed up all of my thoughts completely. So,
darn it, I'll leave you some thoughts next time.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the cable industry finally admitting that caps are not about congestion. Broadband caps. Of course, they're doing a little revision of history at the MMTC Broadband and Social Justice Summit. 4 former FCC chairs were on a panel together, including Michael Powell, who is now the president of the National Cable and Telecommunications Association, the NCT, or Cable Television Association, the NCTA. He said that a lot of people have tried to label the cable industry's interest in broadband caps as congestion management. He says that's wrong. Well, except for the fact that they've said it, balled out. Okay, that's wrong. He says our principal purpose is how to fairly monetize a high fixed cost. That sounds fine as far as it goes, because yes, they have the right to fairly monetize their service, and yes, tearing up the streets and laying cable, that is a high fixed cost. He says if you want to go to the Denny's buffet and fill up your bowl, you're going to pay more than the person who chooses broccoli spears. Actually, I think if you go to Denny's, they don't have a buffet. I also think that if you go to the buffet, you pay the same amount no matter whether you choose broccoli spears or burgers, but whatever. He also emphasized that accessibility for those who are not on the web is essential for this, and they need to make more money off the people that do have internet access so that they can roll out lower cost plans. All this is fine as far as it goes. We've gotten one lie out of the way, that this is about congestion, and good on the NCTA for that. But the rest of it seems to be stretched truths. Fairness still implies someone's using more of the bucket of bits, but they're fixed costs. Once you lay them down, they're down. It doesn't cost more for the lights to blink as people use the internet. So yes, there are maintenance costs, et cetera, but they are stretching the truth a bit there. And if they're all about accessibility, why are we not seeing any cheaper plans for users? Also, if these high costs are eating away, the earnings reports from ISPs don't seem to show them losing money or even having a tight budget like TV manufacturers. They're making great earnings. Carl Bode at DSL Reports writes, what the industry really doing is using the benefit of uncompetitive markets to price gouge customers. So, Darren, all that being said, is what should the NCTA be saying? I mean, it's fair that they want to make money off us. How should they be charging us?
Well, no, the NCTA is going to say whatever it is in the best interest of its constituents. And I'll just say that, the mentor said it best in the 80s when he said that all of this would be, and talking about then long distance phone calls, but really, the same kind of telecommunications industry stuff, that all of this would be dirt cheap if it wasn't run by a bunch of profiteering gluttons. That said, that's the American way. That's the capitalist way. And they're just trying to get every cent they can out of every bit that goes over their wires.
Ayaz, is there any hope for competition being able to solve this? What do you see out of this?
Unless the pipes themselves get deregulated, where you could switch your ISP as easily as you could switch your old landline phone company, I don't see the competition thing changing too far or too fast. Although wireless is making inroads when it comes to broadband speeds, so maybe that'll help stimulate some of the competition. But I mean, right now, I think the way this would seem fair at all, if you're going to start charging people for things, and this is the way we used to pay. You pay for speed. Forget about this cap stuff. Forget about the bits. Just look, I want this as fast as humanly possible. And if it costs me more money to get 50 megabits or 100 megabits or 1 gigabit,
Well, there are
that's the way to
tiers
go.
like that now.
That's the way I think it should stay.
Yeah.
There's no reason to go 1 gigabit with a 3 terabyte cap. There's no reason for that cap. Just charge me as much as you want for this ridiculous speed.
Yeah, that makes sense. Or introduce some cheaper plans for lighter users, like Tom, you suggested. That makes perfect sense, right? I mean, if their whole argument is that, well, some people ruin it for the rest of all of us because they download all these movies and this and that, it's like, okay, well, for the people who don't, how about some cheap plans that make more sense?
Yeah, no, exactly. I don't want to be too heavy-handed with Michael Powell here because he is making the big, bold step of admitting congestion is not why we're doing this. And another big step in saying that it's about monetization. And I've always been fine with that. They do need to make money off of their investment, and I'm willing to pay, but I want to pay for something real. And the thing that bothers me the most is that it's not just that they have a cap and it's like, well, if you use more data, we're going to charge you more, because there are models like that in the world, like electricity. It's that, well, we're going to keep you from using more than a certain amount of data, and then we're going to cut you off. At least give me a reasonable price for the amount of data I'm going to use, or just get, as I said, just get rid of caps altogether. Privacy. Anybody care about privacy usually? I don't know. Maybe a couple people do. U.S. Congress certainly does. They're going after app privacy. What's this about, Ayaz?
Okay, so we got U.S. Representative Hank Johnson released a discussion draft of the Application Privacy Protection and Security Act on Wednesday. That spells apps. Get it? Apps Act. This happened on Wednesday, and I don't know how. It just got picked up. It got a lot of buzz today when I was looking around the news this morning. Now, the act would require a mobile application to provide the user with the notice of the terms and condition and obtain consent of the user before collecting personal data of the user. And this notice must include the categories of personal data to be collected, the categories of purposes for which the personal data will be used, as well as the categories of third parties with which the personal data will be shared. And there's also the ability for the user to withdraw consent. Now, the developer of the app must provide the user with the ability to notify the developer that the user will stop using the app. The user can request the developer stop collecting data. The user will also be able to ask the developer to delete any personal data collected or have the app refrain from sharing data. That's an option of a user. Tom, what do you think of this Apps Act? Does it do enough? Is it too much? Or does this even need to be legislated?
I don't know. I'm usually against legislation unless we absolutely need it. And usually what I would like is for people to just stop using apps, and the reputation, get rid of apps that don't respect your privacy. I guess that a certain amount of truth in advertising type of regulation might be required. I don't know enough about the way current privacy law works to understand whether it's necessary to create one particularly for apps. I'm certainly not against these as policies, and I think the different app stores could take these as cues to implement policies. Not entirely convinced we need a law for it, though.
Darren, do you think that mobile apps should be singled out? When I was looking at this, it appears that it's just about mobile applications on mobile devices, which didn't include laptops. So this is simply about tablets, smartphones, and other smaller devices. Do you think this should be singled out?
Well, I mean, I think that, like you said, it even spells apps. So, I mean, apps are hot right now. Mobile's hot right now. This must sound good in Congress. I don't think that, this sounds to me like something that should be addressed by a terms of service policy by the App Store, not necessarily our government. Maintaining the privacy should be, I think, the responsibility of the individual. And it's, you can vote with your dollar whether you're going to get that privacy invasive app or not. I definitely think that it should be very clear up front, what an application, whether that be on your laptop or your iPad, is going to do as these things, as more and more sensors are in these machines with the ability to violate your privacy. And while it's good to see Congress actually talking about protecting our privacy instead of violating it, I don't think that this is the proper place for it.
Sarah, do you think people are going to actually notice the notice when it shows up as we're going to be doing this, or people are just going to be hitting OK?
Well, yeah, I'd love to see how this works in practice. Should something like this go through legislation? I mean, does it become a very complicated settings menu inside apps? I mean, is this something? Yeah, are these 15 pages that you're going to have to say, yes, I agree to these terms and conditions. Yes, I agree that I'm opting in. Yes, I agree that I will tell the developer when I want to opt out. Yeah, I mean, if that's the case, that sounds like a very convoluted, hey, I just downloaded an app and I'd like to start using it process. But if it can be somehow, if there was some sort of a settings boilerplate where all apps just give you some sort of a toggle on and off option, I can see this giving the community, the people who use apps, more control and feel like they're in the driver's seat. So I don't necessarily think this is a bad idea, but the implementation would be really important.
And by the way, Representative Johnson is asking the public for feedback. We'll have a link on our show notes how you can get to that, so you can actually leave comments and ideas, because this is a proposal. It's not formally introduced as legislation, so it can change before it's introduced. Yeah,
I agree with Darren that this seems to be just riding the app hype. Like, ooh, let's do it for app. I mean, why don't we have this for all software? Why don't we have this for all websites? If it's good for one piece of code, wouldn't it be good for all pieces of code? I'm not saying I want that, but we seem to be doing okay with software in the current state of things with the current rules. Not sure why we need this.
And I can only imagine as a developer when suddenly you've got, all of every country has their own app law then. And then you're like, okay, how do I check all of these boxes so that I can just publish my damn app? That could really hinder innovation.
Larry Page gave an interview to Wired's Stephen Levy and seems to be taking up the mantle of Eric Schmidt and saying slightly crazy stuff.
Well, yeah, I think slightly crazy. Originally, I'm looking at the story. All the headlines are screaming about what Page said about Facebook, but I think his statements on general policy are way more interesting. So he says on challenges, he thinks that technology is being covered like a sporting event. There's no reason for these companies to be constantly shown against each other. He goes, incremental improvement is guaranteed to be obsolete over time. He goes, I think we need to be doing breakthrough, non-incremental things across our whole business. We always have these debates. We have all this money. We have all these people. Why aren't we doing more stuff? You may say that Apple only does a very, very small number of things, and that's working pretty well for them, but I find that unsatisfying. So as I was reading this whole interview, I had this general question. Maybe, Sarah, you got an answer for this. Why aren't more companies doing as many crazy things as Google? I mean, they start off as a search engine. They go into advertising. They go into maps, have self-driving cars, Google Glass, all these crazy projects. Why are so many companies just focusing on these tiny things that are going like as broad as Google?
Well, I mean, I think it has a lot to do with the people who are running Google. I mean, these, Sergey and Larry are well known to be very, very interested in what you might think as crazy experiments. However, they have a lot of money and a lot of power and a lot of employees that can help them realize some of these dreams. I don't think necessarily that Tim Cook is sitting around saying, I want to build a spaceship. Let's just do that with some of our, employee 20% time off kind of a thing. I think it really depends on, your leaders. But at the same time, Google gets a lot of attention for some of their more, far-fetched experiments and is, sort of futuristic stuff. But Google also has a lot of experiments that don't go anywhere. So I think that's the give and take of all of this is you throw a lot of stuff at the wall, see what sticks. Doesn't always stick with Google, but they are innovative, and I got to give them credit for that.
Darren, do you want to see more companies acting like Google, kind of like what Virgin does, where they're just everywhere? Or is it actually intelligent for companies just to be going, okay, look, we're just focusing on the small space. We do one thing, we do it really well?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on really what their business model is. I mean, shareholders are comforted by the norm, and doing crazy things is expensive. That said, you can't just keep, like Larry said, you can't keep doing incremental stuff and expect to be around forever. If IBM had only ever, incremented how awesome the typewriter was, we wouldn't have, seen parts of the personal computer revolution, or probably also give credit to Apple there as well. But that said, crazy things need to be done. Unfortunately, crazy things take a lot of money, and in this day and age, it's easy for a lot of companies to just kind of keep doing the social thing with the uppity apps. Let's do that, So I think that's why we see, I would say we all virtually came back from CES. And I'll say from being personally there that I didn't see a whole lot that was really that innovative. So
Tom, we've seen
That's sad.
companies like LG and Samsung kind of go back and forth, try to one-up each other every now and then. Intel, AMD, they seem like they're fighting with each other, although Intel seems to be doing a whole other universe of work. Do you think this kind of interview is going to give more CEOs the idea of, hey, look, let's try more?
No. The problem is shareholders. Shareholders, even in Google's case, shareholders constantly kvetch about why are they wasting time and money on self-driving cars? Why are they doing all of this stuff? Why aren't they focusing on the things we know works? That's the way the current shareholder system works. That's the way the current stock system works. Focus on the current quarter. Don't think long term. So what Larry and Sergey do, and I think Sarah nailed it, is say, we're the type of people who are going to think long term anyway, and that's why we're going to keep doing this. I don't think it's going to really push any other CEOs to take on their shareholders. And I don't think Apple does what they do because of shareholders, but you certainly don't see shareholders criticizing Apple for taking unnecessary risks. You see them criticizing them for not paying out dividends because they have a big pile of cash. Now that Tim Cook has started paying out dividends, they're fairly quiet, except when the stock goes down. So it's more... If Larry really wants to see more companies do this, he and Sergey and maybe Eric Schmidt should be pushing for a reform in the way we invest in companies and how we hold companies accountable. Because right now it just does not encourage companies to think long term, and you have to be as successful and have as much momentum as Google to be able to get away with doing it. And what he's trying to solve here is what everybody's trying to solve. How do we keep that startup nimbleness once you get big and huge?
Yeah, and Page, in the article, they talked about how Page invested in Tesla because he believes in electric cars. It's people like Page that can continue to fund projects that are outside of Google to keep them going, to get to a future that we all want to see. It's kind of like, who has enough money to do this? And right now, Google does have that.
And with that money, they are making a lovely place to work, according to Fortune magazine. Right, Sarah?
Yeah, they're the #1 of the 100 best companies, at least that are based in the U.S., to work for. This is Fortune's annual top 100 best companies. Which is interesting, though, is that the headline at Android Central says, Google tops Fortune 100 best companies to work for. Apple doesn't even place. But what's interesting about this is, it's true. Apple's not on the top 100. And if you look through some of the companies, they're not all tech companies, by the way. These are just any kind of company. There are quite a few tech companies, but it's certainly not dominated by tech. Google is in first place. And Jason, I don't know if you can pull up that screen again. If you look over at the more data area, it's over sort of that bar, that little up top. Yeah. If you pull down, you've got a few variables like job growth. How much job growth over the last year? Number of new jobs added, turnover, the percentage of employees that are women or minorities, the work-life balance rank, which Fortune puts together. It's not available on every single category for Google. Even though a lot of the other companies, you see that, for example, Zappos is, I think, 61% female employees. I thought that was kind of interesting. You don't actually see that much data for Google. So this whole thing is a little bit silly to me. I feel like I've learned a lot more about, the Whole Foods market than I have about Google. But speaking of Zappos, what I thought also was kind of interesting is Zappos is hanging out at number 31. If you look at the job growth over the last year for Zappos, it's negative 57.3% job growth. So you go, well, that doesn't sound so good.
They just got rid of all the unhappy people.
I guess so, yeah. Well, which is weird because you always hear about Zappos being this incredible place to work because there's this whole, ethical work ethos thing. So maybe they're not at number 1 because they didn't have a very good year, but they do have a lot of female employees. FedEx has the most employees of any company on the list, in the 200,000s actually, which actually surprised me, because there's some pretty big companies on the list. It's at number 98 though, so it's not necessarily the best company to work for. It's just that a lot of people do. I don't know. This is all it's kind of fun for me to find, some of the tech companies on the list and say, oh yeah, that's all kind of fine and good. But I do think that this whole thing is flawed, especially if they have the number 1 company, but then they don't have a lot of data entered for that company that they have for others. So I don't know that it's a very fair ranking.
Well, I don't know why that data isn't there. And then how do they make their ranking?
Right, exactly.
I mean, by all accounts, Google is a great place to, I mean, my wife works at YouTube. She doesn't work in the main Google campus, but I've known plenty of people who do work in Mountain View who say, oh yeah, it's fantastic. We have this and that, and they value it, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not like I don't believe it. But then how did they come up with this #1 ranking?
It's almost like we don't know enough to rank it lower, so it must be #1.
So they get free lunches.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, and they get death benefits for 10 years. That's awesome. Like, I mean, there are all kinds of stories, and there's also, I believe, there's a site called Glassdoor where there are a lot of anonymous employee reviews of companies, and that's been that's been used a lot for all these other surveys. I don't know where Fortune got its information, but Google's consistently been ranked pretty high when it comes to this, because it does seem like what they just want is they want people to be there working and thinking about Google even when they're not at work, because they will treat them so nicely, because they want these people thinking about crazy ideas. And again, I think it starts at Page, flat out being like, we need to do crazy ideas. Everybody, when you have time, go ahead and do that.
Tell you, the one thing that Larry Page has done that I admire the most is say that meetings have to end, that you can't just drag your meetings on forever and ever and ever. That, you know, he's really pushed a culture of like being productive and not just wasting time. It's one of the things I hated about other places I worked is these meetings that just have no purpose and nobody seems to be running them, and they drag on for hours and hours and hours. Darren, what do you think about this?
Well, I think that hackers count from 0, and that 0 on this list should be self-employed.
So you think you should be at the top of this list?
Oh yeah, I think me personally. No, I think like anybody that is able to freelance should be able to put 0 right above Google and everybody else right there.
Sunny Oklahoma in our chat room noted that the top 5 on the list all have cafeterias.
Food keeps people happy.
Yeah,
there you go.
Free food. All right, we have a Google block apparently in the second half of the show today. But Google Vice President of Security Eric Gross and engineer Mayanak Upadhyay, apologies for the incorrect pronunciation if I get it wrong, they both wrote a paper appearing in IEEE's Security and Privacy magazine, the next issue coming out later this month. They say, along with many in the industry, we feel passwords and simple bearer tokens such as cookies are no longer sufficient to keep users safe. We all know we hate multiple passwords. We all know the insecurity of passwords, the risks of two-factor authentication even. They suggest 2 things in their article. Wired has a summary of it. One is a modified YubiKey that logs you into Google, in this case, through a modified browser. So they modified Chrome. You authenticate one device, a YubiKey or maybe a smartphone, and then use it like a car key to log into everything. They also talked about tap to log in with your phone or a special smart card embedded ring. They would just tap against your device and be able to log in that way. Now, they say you still might need passwords for screen unlock. You should only need complex passwords when making significant changes. But they want to develop this, and they want to make the protocol independent of Google. They don't want it to have trust issues like, oh, why am I giving all my login information to Google? They say we want it to be, all you need to do is have a browser that can accommodate this, and it can exist outside of Google. We just want to have this protocol available. Darren, you want to poke some holes in this?
Well, I mean, the conversation is really that, I mean, as we know, authentication is broken. I mean, it always has been. The idea of security is at odds with convenience at all times. And so the idea is like, how do we make security actually convenient? Because it turns out there's a lot of different places that we have to log into. And so Google with their 2-factor auth stuff has done a great step in the right direction. And there have been, and YubiKey as well. Yubico makes some really great stuff to integrate with, like, LastPass, 1Pass, I forget the different ones that they support, but those password managers. So, I mean, it's quite apparent that something needs to change. And these independent password authentication kind of things, these open auth type things have been tried for years. Back in the 90s, it was Microsoft Passport. I don't know. It's a conundrum, because through all of this, even if you do find a convenient on the day-to-day level to log into everything, you still need a backup. And that backup, you're always going to have an Achilles heel no matter what.
What do you think about One Ring to rule your logins, IS?
The chat room is screaming like, "Oh, your key could get stolen, and all things could, if somebody takes your ring or your fingerprint or whatever the device is going to be." I mean, none of this stuff is completely bulletproof. There's always going to be somebody trying to figure a way around this, no matter what. So if it just, as long as it doesn't inconvenience the user, right? That's what we find out when we always see these passwords that are shown off, or they've been when all these things get stolen and they get published, and you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is the most popular password because it's the easiest. That's the issue. So if this ring comes with your phone or whatever it is, and it doesn't ever get lost, maybe it would be okay. But I mean, it's about convenience, and convenience usually wins out when it comes to even things like security, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's why no one uses house keys or car keys, because you could lose them and then someone could steal your car.
Well, I think that's just because that's an actual reality that we had to deal with versus typing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If all our keys were like keypads, I bet you we'd have the same problem.
I think what Google's talking about here is kind of like a contextual authentication scheme where, there's varying levels of authentication depending on what it is that you're just trying to do. If you're trying to unlock your phone so you can make a phone call, then maybe, an NFC enabled ring that touches the back of your phone when you hold it to unlock grant certain privileges that, and then as you dive deeper into what it is that you're trying to do, I'm trying to post on your Facebook wall, and I have your ring, but I don't know the PIN number. It's asking me for that. And as I want to change account settings. Now I need to get a text message and this, that, and the other thing. I think it's good that this conversation keeps happening. And I hope that, with things like the YubiKey and other second factor authentication stuff, we were talking about innovation and doing crazy things. Nobody's taken on this because it is really difficult. So if Google has the money and the passion to do it, I totally applaud them.
Yeah, absolutely. We are poking holes in this because that's what we do. But the idea is the right one, is to figure out a way to maintain a high level of security. No level of security is ever perfect. Steve Gibson talks about that all the time on Security Now. It's all about getting the highest level that you can achieve and making it easier, not because ease is good with security, but ease means people will use it. And right now, passwords are so broken that they actually, I think, people use the same password everywhere because that's easy. And we need to give them a better security method that's going to be easy to use for most people. Well, let's finish up with a randomizer. Did Glee rip off Jonathan Colton's cover of Baby's Got Back? Salon has the story today.
Just one baby. Baby got back, not babies.
I'm sorry. Baby
right.
got back.
It's not like a nursery.
It's not a possessive.
Fat babies.
It's not a the baby.
Yeah,
has.
I just wanted to, since we're
going to be technical about it.
Since we're reporting, just want to make sure.
Glee. Jonathan Colton on Twitter says, "Hey, look, Glee on Fox ripped off my cover of Baby Got Back. Never even contacted me. Classy." Then says, after listening, I think that Glee on Fox may have even used parts of my recording. Do I hear a duck quack? And of course, they say Johnny C. Now that's the smoking gun, right? The arrangement that Jonathan Colton used when he covered Baby Got Back was a kind of a laid back, crooner type. That's what Glee did. So it is exactly the same kind of arrangement. But they also sing Johnny C in trouble instead of Mix-a-Lot in trouble. The original lyrics are Mix-a-Lot in trouble. So they definitely ripped off his lyrics here. Sarah, you're obviously familiar with the song. What do you think?
Well, are they required to? How far is he going to take this? Right? I mean, if this is actually something that happened, he could make a big deal out of it, and I suppose he has enough fans that Fox is probably well aware that he's upset. And that's wrong, but it's always very hard for me to believe that that's actually what happened because it's just such blatant ripoff, It's like, is that really, someone's like, we'll just sort of hack apart this song that we already have and we'll actually use parts of the recording into our song on a really, really, well-known, highly rated show. I don't know if it's highly rated anymore, but, popular show. So I don't know, but it's always a little hard for me to believe that someone would be so just crappy.
I mean, legally, they can do this. It's a derivative work
Yeah.
in Jonathan Colton's part. And so he doesn't own the arrangement because he's making a derivative work of Sir Mix-a-Lot. So there's no legal thing here. But ethically, what do you...
Ethically, I mean, they should definitely credit him. I mean, the fact that they're using Johnny C in there and the arrangement, like I was playing it this morning back to back, and at first I thought I had the wrong tabs open because they sounded exactly the same. Like there's no mistake about it. The arrangement is dead on. I mean, and the chat room is saying that it was only posted online. It was not shown on the program. It wasn't aired on television. So maybe it is some part of the online component. They're like, oh, Jonathan Colton's cool. We'll just do a version of that. But they should say something like, hey, we completely took this from Jonathan Colton. Just bring him in. Just like talk to him about it. Because when I contact him, I'm pretty sure he's available.
I mean, the fact that they used the Johnny C lyric is to me, they obviously just took it. And somebody was maybe lazy and didn't realize that wasn't the original lyrics.
So when I hear that, like having not seen Glee, but when I hear that in the story, it makes me think something that I'm always having to question is this an homage or am I being ripped off? You know, don't you think that could be there as like an Easter egg for him? One of the writers is like a huge fan. Or, as you're saying, could it be a blatant ripoff? One of the writers has no clue.
Well, then they should acknowledge it. They should say, you know, like, hey, tip of the hat to Jonathan Colton, whose arrangement we're using here. Just be kind about it. Be nice. I mean, granted, you have the legal right to do this because it's a derivative work. And once you make a derivative of somebody else's copyright, all you got to do is pay the mechanical royalty. So all Glee has to do is pay the mechanical royalty to Sir Mix-a-Lot. They don't owe Jonathan Colton anything. I get that. But it's a little slimy not to acknowledge it if it's an homage. Let's move on to the calendar.
It is Internet Freedom Day. Happy Internet Freedom Day, everyone.
Yay.
Hope you're feeling free. Not as free as we should be, but, you know, we'll keep working toward it. Mega.
Come out to the EFF thing tonight, San Francisco.
Sorry?
Come out to the EFF thing tonight in San Francisco for the Internet Freedom Day.
Do you have more information on where and when?
Google Internet Freedom Day, EFF, you'll find a thingy.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay. Mega, which is Kim.com's new venture, is set to launch on Sunday, the 20th. You never know them. And SimCity, the new SimCity, the beta is kicking off on January 25th.
I'm excited about that. I got to go sign up for that beta. It's good because you get to play online, other people's cities. You can visit their cities. They can visit you.
Only for an hour.
I know. For the beta, you only get to play for an hour. It's a tease. It's better than nothing. Let's see what's incoming.
Incoming message.
We got an email from Terry from Texas. He goes, I worked for a health department for many years and love the idea of putting restaurant inspection scores on Yelp listings. Maybe Yelp could then put a I feel lucky button on the application that would list restaurants in your area with bad scores.
That doesn't sound very lucky. That actually sounds like
I feel like getting
unlucky.
food poisoning. That would be the button.
I want to be unlucky today. I got to call in sick tomorrow. Where should I actually eat? You know?
There you go. I really do have food poisoning. I got it from Yelp.
Yeah. Just didn't want to go to work. Didn't do my homework. Travis writes in, there are a couple of advantages that you missed about schools getting cheap Chromebooks. Google can also benefit by having the students and teachers introduce the Chrome OS and all of the services that go along with that, such as Google Drive and Google+. Having the kids and teachers adopting the Chrome OS will help get more users. Students that can't afford laptops or iPads will be able to look at Chromebooks as an alternative and will be able to do their schoolwork outside of class. There's also a benefit for the schools because having a cloud-driven device will make it easier for students and teachers to communicate and exchange homework or other documents. If a kid was homesick, he or she could instantly turn in his homework, get notes from classmates for the day that they missed. Students would also be able to coordinate group projects. It would also help eliminate some of the bullying that Sarah said might happen with bring your own devices. Did I say that? I don't remember saying anything about bullying.
No, I don't think so. But
well, I certainly hope kids aren't bullying each other over who's got an iPad versus a Chromebook, but it probably happened somewhere because kids are horrible.
As are people. They're just little people.
That's the problem.
Some good points from Travis there. Thanks for that, man. All right, that's it for this episode of Tech News Today. Darren Kitchen, what's happening on Hack 5?
Oh, we are recovering from CES. We've got an episode up on how to survive it and all about wireless beamforming in the 60 gigahertz range. Check it out, hack5.org.
HAK5.org. Starting Monday, I will pull the blanket off. It won't be entirely done, but we'll unveil the new set. There's still a few tweaks we'll be making as we go along, but I'm excited for that. So, even if you are on the audio podcast, usually maybe just go over to twit.tv/TNT, check out the video on Monday. Let me know what you think. Also submit stories, as always, in our subreddit, technewstoday.reddit.com. If you liked a particular moment in any of our shows at any time in the year, use our best of submission form, twit.tv/best of, to let us know, especially if you got time code. That helps Jason put together those year-end episodes at the end of the year. And we will be back on Monday. Twit.tv/TNT, of course. Email us, TNT@twit.tv, or give us a call, 260-TNT-SHOW. Excited to have Dana Wallman on the show on Monday. We'll see you then.